record this once every 6 months. So we launched the first fragrance, in 8ml bottles on
April 10th.
April 10th, 2023. So then we want to like check in once every 6 months on April 10th and October 10th. Basically just to mark and capture everything that we're working on, everything that we're feeling and experiencing. So it's not this like big content machine and, you know, we're not doing like TikTok day in the life, blah, 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 blah. There might be a place for that. But yeah, just to like slow down the pace. And I guess as an exercise for us as well to distill down a lot of our experiences and a lot of our learnings. And we're doing this now after only 6 months after launching and a year after meeting. And yeah, I guess it's also to sort of look forward as well and to set intention for the next 6 months too.
Absolutely, like timestamps, isn't it? I think
Yeah.
it's real good to stay like cognizant of that for us, but also to like document our growth like really clearly and really openly. In the context of like fragrance, we're not really seeing that. I think that goes into how we first met. You hitting me up like really out of the blue for the project I did with Scent Trunk and Yoshan, creative directing it. I made Trackside Buddleia, which I made the beginning of last year, 2022, and came out in April. And yeah, it came out in America in April at first, and then I circulated here. I did a thing with, which was a part of Freeze, and through like 2 posts on Instagram and like very minimal like online like promotion, if you want. It was me like in real life showing people, like connecting with people on it, and you hit me up. So yeah, how did you like come across that?
Yeah, so I was at uni. I was in my
Big
final...
up Damien Roach. Sorry to cut you. Damien Roach was the Freeze link that
Okay.
he picked it to be part of his show.
Cool.
That was a mad opportunity.
What, Trackside?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
He used it as a part of a show that he did at Coco, and he'd made all these like algorithms, like AI learning patterns, but was really interested by the idea of twisting floral. They were all like based on floral paintings, like Dutch Renaissance floral paintings, and he like changed. They would like manipulate and morph over time, and he saw the link with Trackside Buddleia being this like kind of floral thing, but with this whole metallic kind of real life texture, like me responding to the environment of like London and the countryside and the trains connecting them both with scent, and that was that. But yeah, so
obviously we're here like as there with the Day of Fragrances, but definitely if you haven't smelt Trackside Buddleia, like go on Scent Trunk, and you haven't got any stock left on you, have you?
I got my one.
You got your one.
This
Yeah. I'm not giving away my one
cut.
either. Like, this is the thing, but it's a special fragrance.
This is a deep cut, but yeah, I digress.
Yeah. For me, in terms of finding you, so I was at the end of my second year of uni, and like trying to decide what to do with myself, and I realised that I'd had probably a more specific interest in fragrance than other people around me, and I was wanting a more creative career, being in a very academic environment. So I studied philosophy, politics and economics at Oxford University, this very like intense academic, quite like a linear environment, and I certainly the processes to get there in terms of sixth form education, A levels, like I like had to teach myself all that shit as well. So it was like I was just like coming more into myself, and I think like thinking more broadly outside of these like hierarchical ladders of like how can I get to the best uni, and like how can I get to the best fucking investment bank and all this stuff. And I was kind of, COVID taught me a lot about that, and a like reflection on space and aesthetic experience, and actually realizing how central and important that was to me. Even though for years I just had this like very linear, like hierarchical view of social mobility, and I was like, cool, I'm gonna like, I want to be to go up.
So where did fragrance play a part in that like social mobility perspective? Was that like a reflection of where you were in like a kind of social order?
It
Or
seemed like it seemed like a thing of solace, like a resting place from all of that.
right.
Because almost like the further up I went and the harder I worked to go up, it's like the more difficulties I encountered and the more like barriers that I encountered and the more discrimination I encountered, and like being held back by other things when the people that I was going up against weren't being held back in that way,
Right.
by family circumstances, by personal factors, like all these different things. So like work my arse off to get to Oxford, and then I get there and I'm like, oh, okay, like I'm not, this isn't it, this isn't the golden ticket that I thought it was be. It's just like more refined, like more specific difficulties basically. And yeah, like I did my thing there, like I think I did quite well. And
I mean, it's no small feat,
it's
like
right. It's
to
not
work
bad.
up to that, especially when you haven't been like, you know, you didn't go to your private schools or your,
Not at all.
you know, boarding schools, none
Not
of
at
that.
all.
Like,
But yeah, I think for me, fragrance was this, it was just a different plane altogether from all of that. And I was like, okay, cool. Like how invested so much of myself and made so much sacrifice in many different ways and in some substantial ways to really invest myself in this like very hierarchical, linear, elitist system. But fragrance to me just felt like an art form. And I hadn't grown up around like art forms or artists in that way. Like my house was always like full of music and stuff, 100%, but like relating it to that, or like it felt like that. But it was, I think because it was a new encounter at that age that I was at like 20, 21, it really interested me. I was like, okay, cool, maybe the real mobility is here, like mobility in the fuller sense, not just in terms of like, how can I get like the most money in my career or whatever, or like pretend to speak in a different way, or like, you know, wear a suit or blah, 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 blah. It felt to me, but then looking at that, so this is a very long-winded way of saying how we met, but it's like, it's background information in it.
yeah.
Like I then started emailing around over that summer of 2021, at different people in the fragrance industry, and just like trying to get contacts and trying to like pin people down for a coffee, just chats, whatever. Ended up getting an internship at IFF, International Flavors and Fragrances, which is like one of the biggest fragrance manufacturers in the world.
One of the top 5.
Yeah, and spent 2 weeks there, which was amazing. Like lots and lots of insight there into like how the whole industry works. And then I came away from there and was like, cool, like, you know, I've got my finals ahead of me, like did them, managed to pass. And then, yeah, like there kind of was this like weird summer where I ended up working like this other charity job, because I thought the whole fragrance thing was kind of not really going anywhere. I kind of didn't know where to go and didn't really have much to turn to. It was weird. And then ended up getting an internship at the Fragrance Foundation, or like Fragrance Foundation UK, because there's a US branch and a France branch as well. Like a 6-month internship there, like running their education projects. And we had a project going on, and then I knew about you because I'd been to a talk at British Society for Perfumers and Olfaction, where you were working, like Nick and Pia were giving a talk just about their practice and about perfumery and stuff. And I was just like in my uni room watching it over Zoom. And I was like, cool. So I emailed them, like I went on their website, and then saw you were there. I'd actually seen you in the November before at the, is it like one, it was either like the Fine Fragrance Trends one or the Osmotech one. I'd seen you there, and you were like the only other young person there. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. I didn't know you. I didn't go and speak to you, whatever. I didn't even know your name when I saw you. But then when I saw you on Olfaction's website, I was like, okay,
it made
cool.
sense. Oh, that's jokes.
And then in the, back to the summer, like after uni and starting this new internship at Fragrance Foundation, I then like saw you had released Trackside.
Yeah.
And just like the concept behind it, like the visuals that you'd done, talking about like between two environments and like being in that place in between. This was like exactly the kind of like way of thinking, and like you really communicated the kind of textures within fragrance that had like motivated me and interested me in the first place. And I was coming at it very much from an angle of like really being hooked, say like a year before, by like the ethos and the trains of thought of like Sam Ross at a cold wall. And for me, my big motivation is like, what would a cold wall smell like? And for me, like you were working on that same like line of inquiry and with that same expression, and that just really interested me. So it was like, cool, how can I now in this like industry body at this kind of like top down thing, like I'm not here to like be a pencil pusher and just like do
right.
nothing. I'm like,
Because you kind of were exposed to that side, I guess, really early on of the industry. It really came down to, you know, award ceremonies. It came down to, you know, articles and getting like judged, and, you know, the marketing around it, the times of year that like certain things would be pushed. And you saw a lot of like back end stuff really soon, really early. Which I think is like, well, mad testament to how like we work well together, having those exposures. Because like my way in was like the complete like opposite, even of how like fragrance came about, or like I found it and like worked into it. You know, I came from like a super like creative background, always like focused on art throughout school and going to Goldsmiths University before I dropped out twice, doing design and digital arts computing, so learning how to code while like making jewelry at the time, clothing at the time, still producing music, and various like different things I would like pick up, get really into, and then move through and move on from, but all still having like you know, studio practice from young, and freelancing and doing all these, like getting exposed to that like from like 17. When I first started working into fragrance was when I was like not seeing the lifestyle of a coder and not wanting to like go down that path. Just personally wasn't suited. So scent to me at the time seemed like something that was a lot more embodied, but also I saw like a big gap between your kind of like aromatherapy heads and like people who are like blending at home, and it coming like sometimes very pseudo, like very like kind of a diluted spirituality to it. That was a bit too like loose. But then like really just what that linked to me were an indication that some things do actually have a physiological effect in the body just through smelling, like your lavenders or whatever. And there's a reason why that's tied into certain parts of aromatherapy and you know, the context around it. But that had a massive that had a massive separation and such a difference in terms of perception to what the big brands were. You know, at that time, I didn't know so much about niche perfumery. I knew it was like, you know, this is years ago now, like 10 years ago. I knew that it was still, you know, like that it was a thing, but I hadn't really understood it as a storytelling device yet. I just saw the difference of language, perception, and people who were into your, like, you know, who could afford 5 bottles of their Tom Fords, and then people who would like blend their own lemongrass mixtures at home. So I always kind of saw it in in a social dimension as much as it is like a kind of technical one. And then after like practicing on my own, like again taking coding to different spaces, actually, but I did early some scent design for a show at London Fashion Week with like my little diffuser. I made some like coding for that, like an algorithm, like a visualizer. I got a job at Roulet White, a small independent perfumery in South London, East Dulwich, and then from there found All Fiction, P along Nick Gilbert, and was there for 5 years, working my way up from knowing like next to nothing technically, other than doing loads of trials. Again, like I literally had these tattered books I got through, maybe like a dozen in total, little notebooks of me writing down drops and ratios, not knowing what I didn't know at that time, to then progressing to learn about compounding, which is like working with precise milligrams, like down to the T percentages that your, you know, 0.001% of something will have an influence. That level of nuance and technical ability to work up and through the Centron thing. That's how we ended up getting there. But I just think it's really interesting that our perspective, I think the common thing, even though we've had very different routes, our perspective of perfumery and fragrance has always had like a social dimension. That's where I think, like, you know, that there's no coincidence that we're both like inspired by people like Sam Ross, who hold that social perspective to their work and are critical in that way.
For sure.
In a way, like not not simply being about an exoticized Orientalist escapism, but it being more of like a mirroring back, defamiliarization of what's around, and then extending the possibility of that.
Absolutely. And like for me as well with this, like it's very much been like observing in terms of my background, like my family life, my social life, how people think about fragrance. And even when I started to become aware of, like, the more that I started thinking about fragrance as an object, as marketing, as a status symbol of all of these like luxury motifs and tropes and so on and so forth, you know, like I would see my mum in difficult times wear good perfume, like, you know, with my uni bursary, I made sure that she got her good perfumes and a Francis Kurt de Jans and da, right? It had to happen. And that really interests me, that real interplay there, or there's not an interplay, it's the, like, this was the question that ultimately motivated me. It's like, what's Harrods got to do with my mum? And like, it wasn't that I was looking for my mum in Harrods, but it was like, I was like looking around at this whole industry, and I take like quite a cosmic view of like, hold on, like, okay, let's assume that we're like the only intelligent species in the entire universe. Yeah. You're telling me that the best that exists, that like the full range of what exists within such an incredible art form is Harrods Perfumery Hall or Selfridges or whatever. Like, are you telling me that like the fullest extent of aesthetic experience can be only what is on offer? Like, why can't I see parts of my life or other people's lives reflected in what is on offer? And that really, I think that really frustrated me, because I would also see, like, obviously, like through Instagram, through TikTok, like all of these things about like, oh, this perfume is so luxurious, and like people bending over backwards to get like the 35ml bottle of Baccarat Rouge Extra de Parfum for like £250, and like blah blah blah. And I'm like, are you telling me that like this is what rules the world? This is like the absolute peak? Like, surely there has to be something more connecting and relatable and resonant and authentic that exists in the entire universe. You know, I'm not just talking about England or the world or whatever. So for me, that was like a real key motivation, was to, and like that, then when I saw what you'd been doing with Trackside, like, add to cart, check out immediately. But that was the first thing that I saw that I was like, okay, cool. Someone is practicing perfumery and also developing the aesthetics that is doing that. I understood what you meant about being between spaces. I understood what you meant, and I'd never spoken to you ever before.
Right.
So I was like, okay, cool.
I mean, that speaks to like when we've had this conversation so many times, and more than just us, we've extended this out in the form of like workshops, in the form of link ups, and like various events we've been a part of or hosted, which we'll talk on more later. But the canon of the capital P perfumery as a craft, as we know, is coming from a European aristocratic history lineage, and it opening up as a medium in some ways has been like limited to a select few. And that's where I see this there was back, like, you know, 10 years ago, I was seeing this big departure from your aromatherapy blenders and imagining what a perfumer, a capital P perfumer was. They were like, in my mind, like, you know, worlds apart, and they have been previously, you know, socially completely like separated. And that's what's exciting now, is that more people who aren't of that same background, and not to knock the technical ability and training that you have to do to become a capital P perfumer if you decide to go that route, not knocking that at all, but it's more, again, like the fact that you could understand immediately like where I was coming from and the nuance there, with, you know, and the perspective that I was like, not just like from mine personally, but like channeling from a lot of others too, being between those spaces. That's why I'm excited to be a part of these voices coming through now. But
100%. So like, long story
yeah.
short, like we met because I saw Trackside and I sent you an email, and then we went for a coffee.
Yeah, we got
and then
coffee. That
we
was
got
it.
coffee, and then you showed me a few things. You showed me what is now you showed me
Which had another name at the time.
yeah,
Yeah.
which was
Yeah, which we should like. I haven't really like spoken on it that much before. It was called Eau d'Allégeance, which is a crude translation of allegiance water, in French. And with that, at the time I'd done a lot of living and researching, living with and researching Florida water. I literally got like an empty bottle with me, which is a form of cologne, which is originally like from a New York-based producer, which was founded, I think, in the late 1880s, and was this elixir of selling the idea of the Fountain of Youth, which was supposedly in Florida, but was taken from its kind of original, I guess, purpose or marketing meaning, and spread throughout the Caribbean and used in ceremony and practice, as a bodily cleanser, spiritual cleanser, surface cleanser, used a lot in ritual as an offering. And I was inspired by that kind of departure from its like original use or purpose for a certain market in, you know, late 19th century New York. And again, I think it spoke to like the difference between the perception of a brand, again, seeing like perfume as object or whatever, and the actual materials that are going into that, you know, like citruses like lemon, bergamot, neroli, parts of lavender, things that have a much longer history than just that brand. And there's like those connections being made there. Was questioning that, you know, you hear it in Solange songs, you hear it like, you see it in pictures of like voodoo ceremonies, and it's taken on its own life. So I was inspired by that, just the name alone, like, as a kind of key into that world, the water part, but also texturally, a big part of what I wanted I to be, and what I actually put into the fragrance was using vetiver water, which I sourced from Haiti direct, through a good friend and comrade, collaborator, Anik Jasmine. I got introduced to a vetiver supplier, and this is like a dimension that most people don't see or know about in fragrance, is that aside from the brand owner often being the creative director, not the perfumer, they're also like levels away from the actual sourcing of the raw material themselves. So I wanted to highlight that in the name, originally, but then through like living with it and a pivotal conversation that I had with a great artist called Julianknxx and friend, his whole team, Debo, Tabo, Uncle Patrick, I reorganized my kind of thinking of like what the actual end outcome is versus like the process it took to make it. And Julian just simply asked me, like, you've been developing this thing for 4 years, you've really raised it as like a part of a community, from the materials I've chosen to put in it to the story and feeling that I really wanted to like emanate, to the intention, very much lived experience of moving from London, where I was born, to a small town in Hertfordshire, being, I think, the only person in a few miles to wear a colourful string vest on the street.
I'd say, like, going there.
Yeah,
it was
multiple dimensions of like moving myself away from familiarity, and at times being like, you know, reminded of that, like all of that story, to then call it something French, at the end at the, you know, as the bullet point. So that's when I decided to change the name to and away from Eau d'Allégeance.
I think that was, obviously, that happened before we kicked off with deya, but that was like in hindsight, or like thinking about that, like such an important decision as well.
Oh yeah,
not
pivotal.
not that like any brand or perfumer or creator deserves credit for not using French, but just imagine what it would have been if it's
No,
like
absolutely.
eau de gel is good lord, yeah.
That.
I failed French GCSE, so that I can't.
Well, exactly. Again, more
But
to my
you know what I
point.
mean. By Deya, it wouldn't have
Yeah,
made too much
it's
sense.
yeah, it's cool because it's like now even like open more dimensions to why we perceive French things as luxury, and again the reality of where certain materials, you know, flow through France in fragrance still being a huge like factor in that. I think it really makes the fragrance. It gives me more embodiment, like over like it being something that I've made, and not trying to like dance around the subject, or not trying to fulfill anything else that honestly isn't mine, without, you know, any disrespect. But yeah, it just makes it me, and it makes it what the intention through me was.
And look at in everything that we've done over the last 6 months, and all the people that we've shown it to, and all the people that have bought it and wear it every day, the number of people and the depth with which they've found themselves in it too is incredible.
Yeah.
Like, insane. And it's been
I mean,
such a privilege just to be there and witness those reactions and those feelings in other people. And
yeah, to guide people through that memory mining.
it's been incredible, like just the way that it unlocks conversation and reflection in people. Let's say like we're doing a pop-up or whatever it is, like within a minute someone's talking about something about their life. It like unlocks so much, and you can see the the smile, sometimes like the laugh that can come from it. It's like a relief. It's like a landing place, not just olfactively and aesthetically, but very, very personally, very personally. And that's been so special. And yeah, like long may it continue.
Yeah, I mean, again, like just for like clarity's sake on that, like the kind of beginning concept of the fragrance, which started 4 years ago, was this creative exercise to make a smell and a scent in response to a color, which at the time wasn't about even a perfume. Again, like not thinking along those lines of, okay, let me deconstruct this quote chypre or fougere structure. It was just a scent, a pure smell, to be like sun-kissed skin, melanated skin, questioning like, you know, the complexion and what is seen as like a neutral complexion, where that ties into like national identity, but like, yeah, making something that generally felt warm. And then it was being introduced to vetiver in a like in-depth way of how that's moved originally from northern India to Haiti, where it's mostly produced now. The realities, politics around how that is traded around the world, and again, like intentionally wanting to like dig into that practically, not just like theoretically or like creatively, intellectually, like actually to like use what is a waste product, the vetiver water, into the actual outcome. But then seeing the kind of poetic in that of this thing that has traveled across seas and has this inherent warmth, clay kind of texture to its character, used as like a fixative in perfume a lot, and often in the kind of not like just behind the scenes. Obviously, there's like endless vetiver fragrances, but like on a technical level, used kind of as like a somewhat of like an olfactory glue. Really like pushing that, the texture of that more than just the note, that warmth that complemented that like sun-kissed feeling, and then planting in all these materials that have roots in Jamaican cuisine and from Caribbean cuisine at large, and extending to like links back to West African cuisine of using materials like bay leaf, cinnamon, cardamom, pimento in cooking, black pepper, and to kind of act almost as like subliminal triggers, and not in a wholly like physicalist sense, as you were saying.
We'll talk about that as
We'll
well.
talk about that buzzword right there, but more as a gateway for like a diasporic perspective, something that isn't trying to escape or like imagine like a new you or a new imagine yourself as an archetype, but to open a window as a means to reflect inwards and to find like confidence, strength, and pride in ancestry, in these things that we're raised around and raised with, and again to kind of like stable the self in different environments that in like unfamiliar or unwelcome environments. Again, like the key artwork that I was responding to around that time was Black Allegiance to the Cunning by Lynette Yiadom-Boakye, and seeing that painting in the context of Take Britain and how like profound that was, that you can take someone like a good friend of mine, Essay Onajero, who's like very well versed in the canon of portraiture and like just art, fine art in general, someone who can analyze that for what it means, but then taking, you know, like relatives or people who don't have that academic or like intellectual understanding of it, but still feel like, yo, I feel like I'm at a family function right now. And like that was amazing. And that moved me. So the aesthetics of that, the meaning of that painting really informed how I wanted the fragrance to feel, come across, and for it to be lived with. And yeah, as you're saying, like it really does open up those kind of pathways for people. And that's, yeah, kind of distilling all that. This sense of like collective self, when, you know, if you complement the fragrance, you complement yourself at the same time. But yeah, that was when I showed you like an earlier stage, or like I showed you that in the works back at Cold Drops Yard, and also showed you another fragrance called EXO, which you're wearing right now.
Yeah.
Which I don't want to talk on too much, because it's not out in the world yet, but it's there. But that led us to you coming to a talk I did at Leighton House about Orientalism in fragrance specifically, alongside some amazing speakers. And like it was, I guess, kicked a lot of like critical maybe analysis that we like continued working on, like the various steps down to, you know, the design, but really the like what the fragrance means, what it's trying to embody, led to that lens.
That like to
it's like a year ago now. It's crazy.
Yeah, it was. To like segue into like the next part about our building stages and our processes, I think looking back on that, like it was such a good way for us to kick things off as well. Being, I think we'd hung out a couple times before the Leighton House talk, maybe. I think so. I come to your flat like once.
Yeah.
Which was when like you showed me the logo for deya and we like added like the squared off bit.
Yeah.
And went through like loads of different reference points, and but then like, yeah, that really kick-started that analysis for me and like really like mapping out the industry when, you know, in real time I was working in the industry or for the industry at this big like top down level. It was so it was interesting, it was disorientating as well, it was confusing. I feel like it's only really in the last, well, probably in the last few months I've kind of found my feet and like more of a worldview now being out of that job, to be honest. But yeah, to like really get to work with the analytical toolkit and think about how the fragrance industry behaves and how it's designed or under-designed perhaps, and to kind of apply similar patterns of analysis as I would have done with other things like at uni.
Right.
Doing a lot of like political philosophy, moral philosophy, things like that. I was like applying that to like building a worldview of the fragrance industry. And I think even as is already clear from this conversation that we're having so far, it's this like constant interplay between micro and macro. Like within the same sentence, we'll talk about ourselves or like one little experience, and then that will reflect something back about how things happen like at large, or vice versa. And I think it's really, for me, what that shows is like a real through line between the two, rather than this like polarization or disparity between where we're at kind of personally or on ground level and where it is in like the big wide world. It's actually, for me, that interplay, that relationship between that micro and macro and like the personal and the industrial. I mean, this is what I mean about like finding my feet and like finding our worldview. I just kind of like flicked a switch and I was like, cool, so that means that we have a place in it then. Cool. We don't need to worry about that then.
Yeah.
Cool, we're doing it.
Yeah.
It's just like active participants and practitioners. And we don't, this is why, when I said about like, for me personally, fragrance being this sidestep, this landing point of like a different kind of progression and mobility compared to these like linear, hierarchical, like academic and corporate systems. Like the same thing goes here. Like it's not like we're gunning to like, oh yeah, when we get this big and we get into this department store and blah 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 blah, then like life is good and like that's the goal. It's almost like we're really pleased like all the time about what we're doing in real time. Not like in a smug way, but again, it's just insisting on that sense of place and that sense of belonging within this mad game.
It's a
bonkers.
Very strange terrain. I think like from having friends who work in, you know, art, fashion, and kind of seeing a lot of these like echelons that the like industries of both, you know, what that really boils down to. Fragrance still is in its own domain of weird. Like it's it's nuts. But like again, I think it's a lot of that is a product of like who's been able to come through and like tell their story honestly. It's why like I really respect perfumers like Dana Al-Masri for like holding her sense of self, going through like a traditional French education system to become a perfumer, still holding her own and like unapologetic, unafraid to speak on things, but not changing like herself. This is like what I think has kind of drawn us together. A certain experience where like again you kind of referenced this earlier of like having to change your accent or like, you know, change how you present, and it's not like rocking up to work in a tracksuit and like True. You know.
And I also understand and appreciate the fact that I experienced that in a particular, or have experienced that in a particular form, and other people experience it in a more, I would say, explicit form, or perhaps in more intense ways as well. You know, I'm not out it being like, you know, I've had this, blah, 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 I deserve this.
No, 100%.
But that's what motivates me more, because I'm like, okay, cool, if I've experienced it, probably other people are having it like way worse, especially within different domains like fashion and art, music, whatever else.
Definitely. But yeah, like bringing it like again to who's telling the story, who's able to, you know, the standard of which people are working like in this industry, I think is, you know, holding our own space and not like trying to bend who like we are. Like we can actually just deliver our story where we're coming from as a reflection of the wider worlds that we're a part of, and you know, ultimately like reach people with that.
That's it. It's just staying present, really, and like understanding like what the map is on the personal and on like the big like global level. Like that's why like building a worldview I think is so important, because it means that you like scope out all of the different elements and places and people and institutions and so on and so forth, and then you can begin to sculpt a more like active and progressive proposition as to how that ought to be, and then you can proceed on that footing, rather than just being like, I want to be the next Maison Francis Kurt de Jean, like I want to be the next whoever, like like Crivelli, like let's be like them because they're great. And I think I would like recommend the same for anyone, like in any domain, like even if you're in academia, even if you're in like investment banking, I don't know about that to be honest, but like as like an extreme example, but like how can you just like carry your own thing within that and like not set these like gates and checkpoints of like, okay, cool, when I get to this rung on the ladder, then I've made it.
The goal isn't to become the next whoever. It's to like learn from them and them and them and these lot and this thing to like realize self, realize like where you're meant to be.
360 view, innit? And just moving with that. But yeah, so in terms of like when we first met and when we first started chopping it up to, let's say, launching 10th of April. What did that look like? And then we'll talk about what happened over the last 6 months.
Yeah.
From then until now.
Yeah. Well, there was like a lot of the kind of practical side, because everything that was like made from the like actual bottle, like the perfume that was going in the bottle, to like crimping the component, to the parts of the packaging at the time, to writing on the label, we were all doing ourselves. And like when it came to the actual, the fragrance creation side, I was like weighing everything out myself, filtering it 3 times, you know, a lot of things that normally that's like a product manufacturer would do and you would like outsource. I think another thing, like, which I'm always like very transparent about, is that this is like self-funded, and this is all coming from me, in the sense of like there was no I didn't want to get investment and give away like chunks of these ideas early. I wanted to build it myself, for the fact that, you know, we can have agility and mobility on like what we decide to work on what we decide to develop and when. So yeah, from that first link up to like getting I out, producing all of that, I think it was a trip that I made to Jamaica, which I've spoken on in our other interview we did, but that trip really like flicked a switch. So coming back from there, I really wanted to carry like this experience with me, and things that I learned about how people perceive fragrance out there. You know, people still buying into, you know, your niche Chanels and Pradas and whatever, and also buying like the knockoff dupes of those too. I was like, yeah, when I would show people videos of me in a laboratory, they couldn't really comprehend it. And so I came back with like just a drive to move. So I was doing some late nights, back to back, getting everything ready for April 10th. It's a conversation I had with the amazing Magsy Mackenzie, who just said, set a date, set that date and stick to it. And April 10th was, there was no particular affinity at the time to that date, other than it was, I think, just a solid time, like seasonally, on a personal one, like with my family, close to my sister's birthday. But yeah, there was enough time from when I got back in, you know, February, to just move. And again, these are ideas that the Perfumery was finished. Everything was costed and tested and safe, and, you know, that was ready. All that needed to happen was, to run with it. So coming back from Jamaica, I think, was like a huge part in like kicking that off.
That was the hard part. Obviously, I wasn't there for the creation process of the fragrance itself, but that was the difficult thing, and almost the real difficult design part of like this side of fragrance, which is like all you're doing is creating the vessel for people to experience the fragrance. Like, as I say to you all the time, like, it's whenever we're reaching some kind of bottleneck or some difficulty in a decision, it's like it's the fragrance that's doing the heavy lifting. And often within that design process, when it comes to packaging or graphics or digital side or whatever, it's like don't forget people's reactions and expressions when they smell it. And that doesn't mean that, you know, we can just show up with like a sandwich bag full of liquid and just be like, oh, you smell this. But I think just sort of like having this bias towards that execution is mad key, and actually stripping down the elements. That I remember when the cradle was being designed to hold the 8mm, and we were stressing about like, can we emboss this side, or can we have this like card insert, and can we have the copy there, and okay, how does it come out in the package? And like it was, you know,
Prototyping all of those.
it was like we probably had about 5 different elements to that experience then.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the end, I was like, take that bit out, take that card out, like give people space
Yeah.
to just open the cradle, see it for what it is, and spray it.
Yeah, and in the end, just actually refining it down to no copy,
Yeah,
no excessive labeling or information.
yeah,
All you get was this beautifully textured, beautifully colored card with really cradling forms, holding the bottle, exposing the kind of raw element of the glass, and then a kind of animation when you opened almost like a book, the cradle, and the logo like kind of reveals itself. That was all that was needed. And that, like, again, stripping back all of the fluff, stripping back the illusion of like escapism, that, you know, will come in the form of very long-winded and very romanticized copy, or very over-excessive design and decoration. Stripping it all the way back down to it just a bottle with a remixed Bossman sticker or price sticker with something handwritten on it. That
was it.
That was the kind of most refined way of like showing that what is important here is what's inside the bottle, and ultimately like where that takes you.
I think what we were doing in this time as well was we were looking at how the rest of the industry and the brands operated, and saw like, okay, cool, if I go and get a travel size or I go get a 2 ml sample from a brand, I'm getting this like kind of cheap, kind of like grubby, but like heavily printed bit of card that is gonna have some like sunrise or some like anonymous island on it because there's like, you know, like half a coconut note in it. Or like, all right, thanks Creed. Do you know what I mean? And it was seeing all of that, and again, it's back to that cosmic view. I'm like, is this really the best that can that exists? Is this the best that can happen? And I remember we went to that supplier who makes those like sleeves for the 2 ml samples, and they wanted just like the most insane amount of money for the most average thing. And like, you can understand why, from their perspective, running that business, which is like a very niche business, like, well, of course Chanel are going to pay it.
Yeah,
of course Christian Dior are going to pay it. Of course Creed are going to pay it, so on and so forth, because it's just this like smash and grab. And even like getting custom blotters, if you want them printed and you want your logo printed on it, it's an insane amount of money. Oh, I wonder why. Yeah, because it's multi-billion-dollar corporations that are buying from you, right?
The demand is there, but that's what, again, it's like that's where that's kind of what the arena of perfumery like is at, where it's at now.
It's this really weird closed shop, and I'm so glad that through like a lot of like, obviously through a lot of your creative direction and design, and like with Anik as well, especially with the cradle and stuff, and like a lot of that engineering going on there, like I'm so glad that we like interrogated and resisted going down those routes and into those elements as well. Like that's one thing that I'm like so proud of, as well as like the active design decisions and like the end product. That really sculpted our ethos in real time.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily like we were here in November being like, nah, we're not going to do it this way. Like it's important to say, like, even now in different ways when we're thinking about different things and things that we've been working on here over the last couple of days, it's mad tempting because you know it works, you know it's functional, you know that it's what everyone comes to expect.
Yeah,
it's like
from a capital P perfume brand. But this is it. It's like, this is what building, it, like behind the scenes and in front, like when there is no blueprint, like stepping out of the again, the kind of tempting template of what those things are and what people expect. I think that goes down to the spaces in which we've been going to. Not trying to be a part of your at this stage conventional trade shows, or even like when we did our launch for the larger size bottle of eye and we introduced Kava, choosing to do that at Jumbi in Peckham, South London.
Big up Jumbi.
Big up Jumbi and the whole family there, close to where I had a studio years ago. like I think that was again like a step in that direction of like we didn't want to go do what you'd expect from a perfume brand.
Yeah.
To hire out a hotel and do whatever.
But also, like, it's not being subversive for subversive sake, because we're
Nah.
doing some guerrilla marketing and we're trying to capture attention and boom, boom,
It's
boom.
just simply who we're talking to.
Yeah.
It's like, that's our people. And that's
Yeah.
where people go. And that's like, that again, those, not just our people, but the people who, like, I'm making this to resonate with and inspired by. Like, that's the kind of spaces that we're trying to occupy. Again, fundamentally, I think it comes down to like what fragrance is for escapism, or if it's for something more nourishing. Actually, like, kind of a tangent, but when I was in Jamaica, I went to this incredible place in Trelawney, Northern Parish, a beautiful, beautiful rainforest. And on my way out, in a small town called Duncans Town, an uncle just comes up to me and embraces me. We hadn't spoken at all, none of it. He just spotted me and just saw what I was on. And he said, we're all African. You and I, we're Africans. Like, we're here and this is now our home. And this is my home, and I can see this is like you coming to it. But we have African spirit with us. And I stood with him for a while. Like, this was literally him, like, you know, almost preaching this to me. And it was a beautiful moment. And I was very much like, you know, felt very accepted. You know, I'd never been there to Duncans Town or that part of Jamaica. I'd never been to Jamaica before. And I was completely on my own in terms of who I knew before I went. And I showed him I showed him the fragrance. And there was like, smelling it, there was a immediate sense of relief in his eyes. Like, he calmed, and like something in him just like his shoulders like lowered a little bit. But then he asked me like, what is it for? And I said, it's for the soul. And I think he hadn't like been exposed to like fragrance in that way, or it was kind of like intellectually or cognitively maybe like looking a little confused, but I could just see this like relief. And it like, he kept on going back to me. He's like, yeah, it reminds me of something, And I was like, yo, I'm not trying to, you know, he's like, what is it? It's not a bingo thing. Like, I'm not trying to ask you to guess the fact that there's bay leaf in there, or maybe there's some kind of connection that you're feeling to this. But all that to say is like going back to this like reason of what fragrance kind of means, it being, you know, for escape, or it being for something like a knowing and a kind of a truth, I guess, to like our like individual or to our collective upbringings as individuals. And that, I think, how we've moved and chosen to like do what we do, where we do, again, chose to like work at Jumbi, was, again, we weren't trying to like get people to imagine another reality, or like, you know, to escape and exoticize something else. We were like just mirroring back, like, you know, this is what we're here for. We're here to share these stories, and we can talk on Kava a bit more as well. But it comes down to that.
100%. I think that summarizes it really well. So the last 6 months, since April 10th, what's been going on? How you been?
Bits. Well, I mean, there's been big kind of changes for me. More recently, moving out of the laboratory I trained at, having gone from like lab assistant to perfumer, bodying briefs that aren't just about, you know, what I'm making, come with my ideas, but like really like getting tuned up technically, and also what that space allowed me to do for like scent design projects, working with amazing artists that I look up to still, like Anthea Hamilton, R.I.P. Germain, Shay Gregan, Ryan Hawaii, Speakers Corners Quartet, and like a load of other people who've like really like fueled my perspective and creativity, and exchanged a lot with. I mentioned Julianknxx already, Ash Walker, like so many projects coming out of that space, and all the technique I've learned there. That's been a big shift, and I'm very excited to build my own laboratory studio from all of this knowledge and this skill that I've built over that time. But of course, we've gone through countless like iterations, conversations of not just like what we're making, you know, the final kind of product, or like how down to like what packaging we use and how that's still growing, but also the system of how we're working behind the scenes, going from chasing, you know, hydrosol producers for months and learning the realities of what that is, to like, you know, again, not follow the template and to contact manufacturers directly. But we, of course, started releasing Kava, the second fragrance, which I think has been, amazing to see the reaction of.
I want us to talk about the last 6 months.
Yeah.
So let's keep on that, and then
we'll move to Kava.
We'll talk about Kava then, because it really does. It deserves some time and space to really reflect on. And there are ways in which we didn't do that so much as what we did for and I think we should also talk about those reasons too, to reflect on. But the last 6 months in terms of deya they've been brilliant. I mean, when you think about the things that have happened, and in terms of our launch party at Jumbi with Ash Walker doing a set for us,
spinning the freshest finals.
Yeah, with Saint Lagoon, like making the signature cocktail for us, which is still available at Jumbi if you want to go and try it. It's gorgeous. What's the name of the cocktail again? What is it? It's the vetiver and bay leaf sour. No, is it the vetiver and bay leaf sour?
Yeah, bay leaf, the vetiver bay leaf sour.
Yeah. And just like having, as you said, like having all of our people come through to that and just spending time together, man. It was so good. And then 2 days later, we sent it the Roundhouse for Speakers Corner Quartet album launch as well. Did an intense there. You were doing your aroma jockeying, like sending out the whole thing of like 1,500 people there.
Yeah.
And we sold out of the fragrance and sold out of the incense, and that was fantastic. That was like the most exhausting, like 72 hours ever. That was crazy, but it was unreal. And like we learned so much in such like a concentrated portion of time. That was incredible. Then of course we launched the 50 mils too, and then came out with Kava. Am I missing something? I swear we did something else. Oh, Ash Walker's launch party.
Ash Walker's launch. We've
that
also
with his signature incense, Astronaut. That was amazing.
We then scented the Top Boy exhibition at Somer's house with Kava. We've done
Jumbi's first birthday party. That was before the Top Boy
incense.
thing.
Yeah.
So that was a brilliant event, and had that smelling nice, and like that was our first time doing, not our first time, but because we did it for the Jumbi launch party, but for Jumbi's birthday. It was like a bigger event, and I think there was more like design elements into our visual merchandising and more references there, which was really fun work. I really enjoyed that, and got to like chat to a lot of people and to a lot of people, and Kava, which was amazing.
And I mean the workshops we've been doing, with young people, educating them about perfumery, compounding, perfume design or fragrance design, pulling apart elements of Kava for them to remix their own, and even like prior to that, just showing kids, like introducing them to this industry up in Oxford. 2
main institutions, one being Inter University, who are a brilliant like youth organisation that give like mentoring and extra lessons to kids from like primary school age all the way up to 18. And like when I was in sixth form, I was on like their mentoring program and stuff, and like benefited massively from them. Then like always stayed involved and still do like university application tutoring and mentoring with them. And then we had the opportunity to go back to my old school and do a workshop there, which was amazing. And then a couple of months after that, been running some workshops at the Science Museum in London, which has been great as well. So yeah, like really firing on all fronts.
A lot. And I mean, a big part of my year and the last 6 months, the Carl Freedman show, where I used
yeah.
I to scent a sculpture that I made in Jamaica, and covered with a string vest, which acted kind of like a diffuser for the space. I built this installation and like scented sculpture looking like a clothesline, hanging this structure from it. And again, another amazing way to connect like fragrance to not just like a retail setting, but also for people to connect to the intentions and the storying behind seeing it visualized, and you know, seeing the string vest kind of throw people off because it's not conventionally made into a part of a bag in that form, while working with a palm leaf that I brought back from Kingston. That was like a really important and pivotal like part of my practice, a moment for like my development, and again for I's development, for Deya's development. But yeah, there's been a lot.
What are you most proud of what's happened in the last 6 months? If you had to pick one thing.
I think in terms of the kind of practical stuff of what we've done, I mean, it would have to be Jumbi. Like all the people who showed up, like great friends, great practitioners that I hugely respect to, all the support from Jumbi, Nathaniel, from Bradley, from Rudy, Spike, everyone there.
They've been amazing.
It's been great.
Such a privilege.
But the genuine like atmosphere of that space, to actually see what we've been talking about, like today, but also like, you know, how we first started talking, dropping the pretense, dropping this sense of like, you know, entitlement around fragrance and the gated kind of mode into like experiencing scent, making an actual space where people were sharing stories, ultimately just having a great time, like ultimately just having a vibe, like it was actually a link up. It wasn't some kind of pretentious, you know, escapist thing. It was just great people holding great space.
Mm-hmm. And we've been to those fragrance launch parties as well, and they are whack. Despite the big budgets, all those other brands need to up their game.
Because they're just not, it's not, it doesn't come from a place of resonance. Again, I think it's like things that I'll say over and over is like, you know, escapism is about leaving. It's about the departure more so than like who you really like here for. And I think that is just reflected in the kind of people who do have access to these spaces. But yeah, I was super proud of that. And in a kind of or the more kind of like functional or practical flow of like us of Deya in the last 6 months, I think it's our like resilience. We've been throwing some curveballs. We've been hurdling a lot of like challenges from, you know, multiple directions. And I think knowing and trusting and just moving regardless of like a very difficult circumstance. I'm super proud that we've like stayed through that. So, you know, not to say that all of them are done. There's going to be many more hurdles to jump and a few more curveballs we might have to smack. But, you know, we move regardless.
Yeah, I'd say that is what I'm most proud of, is like me and you, and how we've really worked, and like, how do I put it? We've both consistently done an excellent job of being there for each other and like being a sense check rather than a sounding board. And it's been, yeah, I think the way that going from like not knowing each other at all and like not sharing any like mutual friends or mutual spaces or nothing like that, to in parallel developing working relationship, building a business and a brand and releasing fragrances, and then building a friendship too.
Yeah, massively.
And not because some like higher power has put us both in a room, and you know we're like we're just the two guys doing the overnight shift, and we like have to. But it like that has created the resilience. The resilience doesn't come from, it's not this like hustle, like bro hustle grind where we're both just being mad stoic and like being disrespectful to everyone. It's like the characteristics and the values that we've brought out in each other and made sure that we really display and offer like in the world and in how we carry ourselves.
Yeah, and rehearse,
Yeah.
like practice, you know.
Legit, that has been so personally impactful for me, and I think really difficult to do as you're trying to grow a business and
Yeah, facts.
you're trying to live and juggle jobs and juggle relationships and family and everything. So yeah, I think that internally really defines how we've been working, and like I think is like such an integral part of our story so far, and will only continue to be so. And I hope that only like grows in how much that shows as we get more opportunities to do pop-ups and activations and launch parties and sent in events and having our own space and so on and so forth. That like those principles and that life will just come through more and more and more. That's why like
Absolutely.
I have such like a trust and investment in what we're doing, like such a conviction because of that. It's not because of like financial power, and it's not because of like, yeah, we're sick, like so talented, like blah 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 blah. I think we are, but like that's not
And the financial power's coming.
yeah, the financial power's coming. But like I think that's the real fuel there. That's what makes the difference.
Yeah, that's what's up. And again, all of this, not to like keep on returning to it, but all of that in the context of like the perfume, capital P perfume space. I'm mad proud that we just hold ourselves down. We ain't trying to change to cater to anyone else. And like, yeah, man, go each other's back.
Yeah. I'm so glad that I've not picked up any new French words during this whole time. It's such a relief. I remember I had like towards the end of the time at uni, I was like, okay, cool, what am I going to do over the summer?
Yeah.
And I wrote down, get hench, learn French. Because I was like, that is what was going to turn the dial.
Motive. Oh, that's so jokes. That is so jokes.
Yeah.
Fucking hell.
But yeah.
Yeah, man. I still be correcting people that I'm a perfumer from South, not a perfumier from Paris. And
people be saying parfumier,
all of that
perfumier,
jazz,
perfume.
man. No disrespect, that ain't me though.
Yeah, not French. Not French. What would be a good time to talk about Kava?
Yeah, cool. I mean, for all of like, for all of the kind of like, I guess like depth and weight that I carries, the levity too of the actual like how it feels for people to wear, and like I still can't smell it and not smile safe. Kava was definitely something a lot more playful, especially in how like we wanted to present it and how we wanted to introduce it to people, and how people lived with it. I think it came from us from a super sincere place, having a conversation about particular experiences that you'd gone through, I'd gone through in the industry. Again, certain like isms and schisms we don't need to give light to right now, but really like resulting in like this bookends idea, and having fun with that. So for those who ain't smelt it, Kava starts with this like champagne, prosecco, Kava, Spanish wine, fizziness to it, and kind of air around it like when you've popped a bottle in celebration. But then has this like immediate character of black grape soda, which you might get from various brands like KA, Bigger, that same profile. The black grape profile exists on its own really. And marrying those two worlds together, and then goes into this kind of like peppery rose at first, that then like it's heartier and heartier and heartier until you get into the cypriol and oud, which are two different things. Most people read cypriol as oud because it's got a similar kind of character but lacks the real depth and lacks the kind of multifaceted side of what oud is. but they all kind of integrate to something that's both mature and grown and celebratory, but also like playful and brings smiles to people's faces, especially when we ask them like, yo, do you used to drink K growing up?
When people get it, it's
they get
so
it.
fun.
They get
it's
it.
so much fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you just say for a second, can we just like clear up this whole cypriol and oud thing?
Yeah, cool.
Because the amount of questions that we get, like when you're just like chatting to someone,
Yeah.
and they're like, oh, have you got any fragrances with oud in it?
Yeah.
Like people's, and like I don't quite yet know how to define what kind of people. I haven't found necessarily a pattern to it, but there seems to be some kind of whirlwind around oud as an ingredient.
Yeah.
Can you just say, let's speak on that for a second about what you think has led to this interest in oud fragrances in a wider way, and actually what oud does smell like and different kinds of ouds do smell like.
Yeah.
And then the relationship between that and cypriol.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like off the bat, it's basic, like simple. There's two different plants, like two different trees, and they both have a similar character, but fundamentally like different things. Oud comes from agarwood and is a product of a certain type of parasite getting into the wood of the tree, and it produces this kind of substance as a response, which is then to the parasite getting in, which is then dried, and you can have as like individual chips, which are then burnt as bahor or incense, and then you can distill that oil from the wood down out of the wood chips to produce this very, very potent like pure oil, which has like insane strength in terms of how far it reaches, like being exposed to air, but also the longevity is like wild, and is used a lot in the Middle East, and a lot of fragrances that are oil based, again designed more to like extend from the skin and on clothing for like a longer amount of time, which kind of does away with the French system of eau de toilette, eau de cologne, eau de parfum,
which is using alcohol.
Using alcohol, ethanol, denatured. So yeah, that's like some context of oud, and cypriol is a different tree. Again, the wood is just distilled down into like essential oil form, and the link, I think, is the kind of character of this rich, quite almost kind of like damp, resinous texture, which cypriol has a kind of sweetened edge to it, almost like a caramelized edge to it, whereas actual oud has so many facets to it, from like a kind of like cheesy character to like a really like dusty, almost like barnwood kind of character, but really this very alive heart that feels almost like a living thing. It feels bodily, it feels like animal, it feels like it's kind of breathing in a way, and you know, that kind of again texture to it, like raw, like very warm skin after like a long day, like that's done a lot of living. You can really feel like it's got this kind of like sense of life in its own. But yeah, I think there's been like a lot of trends of like quote oud fragrances, perfumes. You know, some, you know, Tom Ford is the obvious reference, but a lot of Western perfume have like integrated oud into a more palatable form of the material, and that's where the cypriol link comes in that I think you could, with the right priming to people who've never smelt real oud, in combination with some pretty, you know, fluffy and exoticizing copy, you can sell the idea of this thing rather than without needing to use the real thing.
And when you think about the main brands that have done this, and at least to my mind, you know, we'll interrogate this over time, but it's Tom Ford, Gucci, maybe Guerlain to some extent, Louis Vuitton. It's these like big brands that kind of in culture and in fashion are seen as these big status symbols as well, Do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
not like within capital P perfume, rather than like, you know, your actual oils that are actually applied by Middle Eastern people, so on and so forth. Like it,
Or it's like sold, you know, also
yeah,
like in London, you know, by
yeah,
dons who aren't in the like, you know, liberties game.
yeah,
Again, no shade to that, but
yeah,
like people who are out here, you know, and they got their little store outside Brixton Station, or
yeah,
they're on road in Peckham, maybe not so much now, but used to be, and they just got their little oil collections,
yeah.
like
That's great.
with some legit oud in it, some with
Some not.
cypriol in it,
Yeah,
but like that.
that's great. I think the thing that frustrates me is that like buying your it's the feeling behind it, maybe, or like it's the cool, I want Tom Ford oud wood,
Mm,
or I want the Gucci oud, I can't remember the name of it, or like the Louis Vuitton oud one.
mm,
I can't remember their names, but it's like this almost, it's the same as like the Louis belt or the Louis bag. It's these status symbols,
yeah.
and they've kind of, they're hooked onto oud. They obviously in the name, and it's sort of these status symbols have come to mean oud in a way, like it involves it. So I think when we find with some people, when they ask for it or demand it or say that they like oudy fragrances, it's like it's in the same way of saying that, like, oh yeah, I like belts,
Right.
but like if I offered
This
you a
type.
belt from Marks and Spencer's,
Uh-huh.
I don't think you're going to want it.
Yeah.
You want the Louis belt,
Yeah.
you want the Gucci belt, and I
That's an
think
interesting analogy.
that's like something that's going under the radar with capital P perfume, because we can talk about French luxury tropes and motifs and like these like sociological dynamics with that, but I think it's also happening like in a very orientalist way in terms of the Middle East too. But at the end of the day, these are French and Italian and, okay, Tom Ford, like American fashion houses, owned by huge conglomerates,
Yeah.
with licensing deals to fragrance manufacturers,
Right.
that are
But I
creating
mean,
the same status symbols and actually affecting on the ground what it actually means.
again, yeah, 100. And I mean, like, ironically, some of those huge companies might be able to afford to use, like, you know, real oud in their fragrances, but like, you know, or like, you know, prime with like a microscopic amount of oud and then like mostly cypriol. But yeah, again, it's like they're not. It's who the story's being told by, and I think at the end of the day, like, you know, naturally, like they're just catering to markets, who are, like, you know, buying into that. But that's big part of like where the oud that like we've used in Kava comes from Vietnam, and we've used a 30 tooth of it is sorry, a 16th of the overall formulation is using oud water, which we got direct, and like not as means to just do that for the sake of it. The water itself adds like this crazy texture, like that gives that humidity. It gives the stickiness, which just ties it all together. But yeah, again, fundamentally, like it's just an important principle that we've carried forward from and will continue to, of sourcing direct, cutting out that middle reseller.
For the waters as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. With Kava, so with this idea of bookends and like the through line of the grape from like pop in a bottle celebration, but also perhaps these like higher class environments, and then sort of bringing that same material through to, yeah, like your kind of black grape that you're going to get in the corner shop. Why did you decide to ground that with oud and cypriol? Was it simply, not simply, but like, was it an olfactive decision because of what it produced? But like, what does the oud and cypriol tell any story within that as well, or did it just, it made the fragrance perform how it needed to?
I mean, I think honestly, like part of it was like the olfactively like made a real interesting shape that I hadn't really come across before. The grape oud part. But yeah, again, also, I think a part of imagining where, you know, these grape flavors might exist, like in real time, in like, you know, a corner shop, you know, someone picking up their KA. You know, there might also be like the little tray of, you know, oud rollerballs as well. Just stuff you see around, you know. But yeah, I think really it was an olfactory pairing that made sense instinctively, just with gut feeling, and kind of has allowed people to, well, yeah, to invest their own imagination into it too.
Cool, love it. Kava out now. wearedeya.com. But yeah, it was also mad interesting when we did the science museum workshops and getting the kids to make their own flankers and like remix Kava and use their own ingredients. And it was like black grape hasn't been this ingredient in perfumery that's been so popular or been used so much for reasons that we might be able to imagine or interrogate. But it was great just to see, like, time and time again, like workshop after workshop, and like kids chopping up the black grape note with pineapple, with candy floss, with like cedar wood, with like all of these different things. It was like going through that process as well, I think just highlighted how much these ingredients like black grape really do belong in the canon of perfumery, through perfumery practice. And it is strange that perhaps there are lots of different ingredients that would be, say, like we've said, in the London palette, for instance, that aren't being used or aren't even being thought of. And I
or
wonder
like relegated to somewhere else.
Yeah, and just like kept as flavorings, kept as drinks, kept as foods.
Or kept as like popular, you know, fragrance, fragrance types for cheaper hair care products, or for, you know, exclusively for like lotions or things that are, you know, promoted to like black Jamaican castor oil. Yeah, just kind of kept to those types of products. Bringing that out is something that I'm very interested in doing it in a nuanced way, in a way that can kind of change your perspective on that material, or like, again, the pairing that it might traditionally or like has been with before. Yeah, and just kind of push it. Like, no one wants to just smell of KA black grape. You don't want to pour that on yourself. But it's taking that one element, like pairing it with this, like, you know, grown champagne though, and then this like body of oud. It's like, it smells expensive from something that like is perceived as just a cheap canned drink.
And also what I've really enjoyed is showing it to loads of people, and they love it and really resonate with it and wear it, but they've never drank KO black grape before.
Yeah, right. There's also this.
And then I'll be like, let's say like bump into someone or something, I'll be like, cool, Sainsbury's just there, and I'll go and buy them a can, and they'll be like, okay, cool, I get it now. But that's been really cool as well. It's like, it's not just, obviously this is the intention, but in terms of how it actually plays out in the real world, it's like the perfumery is not just for people who quote unquote get it.
No,
like,
absolutely.
That's the main thing. That's the main joy of it. But it's really interesting to observe how it's received by people that don't go corner shop.
Sure.
That have never drank black grape. They don't know what K is. They don't know any of those things.
Same way with people who don't have that, like, you know, ancestral connection to some of those materials. This isn't designed in an exclusive way. Again, it's not designed for the sake of it. At the end of the day, they all have to perform as like high standard of perfumery. And like, you know, I've really obviously worked on these for a long time, pushed myself to that standard, from experimentation, trial and error, to refinement, to refinement, to refinement. So like that, I've always wanted to speak for itself, and let anyone's imagination run wild with it. You know, they might build a whole different association to what I could see. And that's what was refreshing, like working with young people, you know, teenagers and some even younger kids, like seeing how they would interpret it and seeing how this associations they would make. You know, it kind of, for me anyway, goes without saying that the efforts and ideas of sourcing and of where we're kind of critically looking at, and again injecting these like social lived or representative things, like they're not just for the sake of it. They're not just to turn around to say that so we have done it. it serves to like make something that to an objective viewer, to like an objective, like someone who doesn't relate to these stories direct can still judge it as a great piece of design and a great object, great product.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wicked. What have our main reference points been in terms of design, product design, branding, but also business principles?
I think for me, a key reference that I continue to return to is Barbara Hepworth. Her sculptures, seeing them in real spaces like Yorkshire Sculpture Park, and also seeing her more developmental stages of certain like maquettes in Wakefield was a real real like inspiring kind of approach, and that is her works, this idea of like travel, this idea of kind of like a portal, this idea of being held and security, all coming from an deep appreciation for like organic form and structures, almost like the natural sculptures that are made in lived like natural environments. That was continues to be like a huge inspiration. I think in terms of like the cradle specifically, Richard Rogers, I had a studio with VO Curations, big up Namdi. Their spot in Monument near the Lloyd's building, and seeing that, walking around that routinely, getting into understanding some of the design, this idea of keeping some of the most like crucial or swappable like elements like that would need maintenance on the outside, keeping them exposed, really inspired what the cradle became, for having the glass of the bottle so raw and on the outside, in a way like showing the straight liquid, and that being like in a way a reminder like that's what's important here, but also not trying to like hide the bottle through layers of packaging and tissue paper, but just keeping it raw as an element like that was huge. I think those two references are very like strong. They're strong designers that I return to.
For me,
you shoot some, because there's like a lot of different names and people flowing around my head right now, but
there's a lot. So of course, like your roles is perfumer, creative director. So just to give an insight into kind of like the workflow, and like we never work separately either. Like we're always working together. But I mean, you as creative director, that you, and also coming from like the experience and background and education that you have, like in terms of your skill set, it is leading on those designs. Absolutely, like you're sketching it up, like you're seeing it in your head in ways that I just like can't comprehend, and like that's what keeps it so fun. But so then when you come up with these, like you teach me about these references and these artists and all these different things, I'm then assessing in my head, okay, how does this translate to a customer experience? How does this relate to brand identity, to through lines? Like, what is the story that can be told about this? What are the underlying assumptions and premises that we're trying to express through that element of design? It's like almost trying to like codify that creativity into words, not necessarily to be like written and posted online, but it's like then interrogating those premises and the implications of those premises, very much like what I did in my philosophy degree, right? And so I would say for me, like big reference point is just kind of like more like philosophical method, more generally. But that's why I love the work of Benjamin Edgar, artist from Chicago, who really reflects, or like he refers to himself, or like his brand, which is like named after himself, as an object company. And just like, I just think it's brilliant, just reflecting on what different items mean as objects and how they're held and how they behave, and how he uses different like scale, texture, weight, sometimes to be dysfunctional, sometimes to be overly functional. Yeah, his line of thinking is absolutely brilliant in my mind. And his incense holder is sick, and I'm waiting for it to come back in stock. And when it does, I am dropping a couple $100s on it. So like he's great because I really see through his practice how he really interrogates those elements and really reflects, doing that again, that zooming in, zooming out.
Yeah.
I think I love that so much. On a more like branding side, there's a menswear brand called Stòffa, who I think have excellent digital branding. I like some of their clothes too. I mean, they're way out of my like price range. For now. But their digital branding is superb. I love the way that they use different like structured images and fonts. It is on this whole pareback minimalism, which I think isn't our design language, but actually we use and lean on and employ at certain times to make sure that we're focusing on the essence of what we're trying to do and what we're trying to communicate. Sure. So even if visually we don't have this like blank, pared back, soft toned minimalism that seems to be like such a kind of design zeitgeist with a lot of brands now, and is working and I find appealing, like as a consumer I do really like. I think using those methods can really force us to distill down what we're trying to communicate and what we're trying to do, rather than just treating everything as this kind of like sprawling canvas, because it's too overwhelming. So yeah, for me, like it's brands and it's artists and creatives and businesses in so many different ways that really it's kind of, you have this initial like expansion and analysis, that like real like just like sheer creativity and talent, and then it's like analyzing what that reveals, what that mirrors back,
right,
codifying that into premises, breaking that down, analyzing the implications of that, and then ultimately distilling it all down into something that is cogent, that is readable, that truly expresses what's going on. And in like the copywriting that we do as well, like I hope, and obviously there'll be more copy for everyone to like get their teeth into over time. But I hope that like that comes across as well, like the precision in that language, without being pretentious or fluffy or like overly elaborate. I hope is like precise and true, and like we put a lot of effort into that too.
Yeah, I think now like even like we are like what is out there for how we've described things, I think gives that like strong indication, and like reflects the intention, but isn't we've stripped it of the fluff a lot to keep that like room for imagination. Absolutely. I think just like to touch on it again, like two artists that hugely inspire people that like, you know, I was fortunate enough to work with, being Anthea Hamilton and R.I.P Germain. Like R.I.P's show at ICA was like really intriguing. Yeah, his show at ICA, the way that he was playing, dancing between these like social codes in spaces like a trap house and then like a jewelry shop, bringing them together, making those kind of, again, bookends of like how you navigate those areas, you know, literally using certain codes to access certain things. And then others were more like social codes of how you stand around a cabinet, how you have to conduct yourself, how the kind of how you're treated as a viewer or potential customer, and then how you're treated as like a possible snake or like, you know, if you know, all the different kind of, yeah, all the different ways of navigating what he calls baggy spaces. And then, yeah, Anthea's work, seeing how she creates these collages of like pop references, pop cultural references, and brings like certain, what she calls like just luxurious photography of, you know, someone being like wrapped up in sheets and like slaps that on the floor for people to walk all over and walk around. down to like her performance, how she like integrates performance art and again builds a bridge between, you know, building these amazing like Loewe garments and then, you know, costume. Yeah, both of those artists is definitely still like an ongoing inspiration.
I'd say also, just to like drop it, like Ellsworth Kelly, like going to the Philadelphia Museum of Art and spending some time in there. I spent a fair amount of time in Philadelphia over like, I guess, the course of last year, and seeing that there, and like my first exposure to that like abstract kind of work and like not really understanding it, but then reading into it more. Again, like I'm having all of these experiences for the first time, like in my early mid-20s. I don't know much about much, to be honest, like in this whole like art design world. So it's all, but obviously like I have my own like developed like character personality, at least I hope. And so that's what makes it more exciting. Like when something resonates, it's kind of like there's nothing, it's not clicking with anything behind from the same world. It's perhaps like other like it will, I would say, quite sharply, quite directly reflect things back to me about myself, rather than me trying to study it in context of like other works, other canons, that kind of thing. So like Ellsworth Kelly for sure, Donald Judd, like a furniture design, and like I know that like I very much see Benjamin Edgar like along those lines, and like within that through line too. Like Tekla, in terms of their branding and their photography, I think is brilliant, and they deliver on the end product too. And like creating those again, it's like it's towels, it's bedding, it's something, so it's like such a utility, like such a basic, but without getting pretentious and without selling prescriptive lifestyle codes. What they do is communicate closeness, embrace, rest, things like this. And it was actually through Tekla that I discovered John Pawson as well, and some of his work. Some of his essays in particular, I love the way that he writes, which is really important to me, more so than the buildings, I would say. But yeah, that's when I know all these along like very like minimalist lines, but it's not this kind of like, I mean, we won't get into it, we'll do it another time, but that I have my problems with minimalism and the way that it plays out
different conversation
in modern culture. But I think these people are focused on essence more than they are absolving or cleansing, and that's why I like employing it at times when we're working. I think that's been really cool. Big up Cole Buxton as well, just like as a business, love it. I think it's great. Like the products are decent, the products like do deliver, but I think as how they run as a business, and like using Cole Buxton and Johnny Wilson as like examples and their workflow. And I mean, we're sitting down today because they did, not because they did the same thing, but it gave me the idea of like, I just loved sitting down for a couple of times and like watching them speak on those things. And
because it's honest. And I mean, you showed me a lot that site where you say with me, and you know, principles that we've carried to, like when they said brand over business at times, that infamous line from Johnny, like carrying things in your stride that even might not make financial sense, but like things that are still at the end of the day like honoring who we're talking to. There's again, it's not trying to copy no one, but it's like giving your hat to like, you know, who's doing it really well.
Absolutely,
they're definitely a good example of that.
I look up to a Bag of Veli a lot as well.
Yeah.
I got their canvas tote and it is superb, and I want to see a lot more from them. Like looking forward to seeing more from them. Just the
shouts to Sage Nation as well.
100%.
Can't leave my guy out.
Clothes are gorgeous and like
cuts are emotional.
Feel lucky enough to have a few pieces now thanks to him, and those design codes there. And like digital branding and stuff, like the photography, digital branding is
Akinola Davis on the videos too. Yeah, big up.
Been amazing. So that's the kind of worlds that we're coming from, and I think again back to what I said like right at the start of this conversation about that placement. You know, realizing what resonates and then taking that forward, not necessarily only in terms of design cues and design elements, like as you did with the cradle, for instance, but just in terms of general, just wanting to be amongst and deciding to be amongst, actually.
Well,
It's not carrying the want, it just is.
Yeah, that's what it comes
With
down
all
to.
due respect, because obviously I understand that these brands are way further ahead than we are, like commercially and in terms of products. So I don't want to be like, yeah, like we're like rubbing shoulders, like here we are. But I think
No, it's not
yeah.
that. Again, it's just like things that naturally like influence us. And yeah, as I said, like seeing how people are making their own way. Yeah, just gotta respect it.
100%. All right,
Cool.
next question. We're still going through it. We've got a lot more. I'm not letting you go. Building a brand and a business, I think, it's such a comprehensive way of like growing yourself, but there's a lot of growing pains personally that come with it as well. Like it will flesh out all the like fluff and dust of feelings about like key things and like particular insecurities and wants and tendencies, relationship with like risk, judgment, excellence, success, all these different things. How do you think you've grown in the time building Deya so far?
I think like so far grown enough to know how much more growing there is to do, but also that growing doesn't stop. I think again there's been a lot that that I haven't been kind of mentored through, and I think like that is definitely like creatively definitely having some education and mentorship from working at the laboratory and from various other places and other artists. But I think like grounding all of that into the business has been new and definitely, yeah, as I said, like things that there's going to be a lot more to learn in that way in terms of growing and expanding like any business team, across different spaces. We already work from, you being in Oxford, me being in between London and even here now where we're at in Dorset. Navigating that and like working with that has been, sometimes I think growing pains when we haven't been able to be in the same space and same room because of various things, which is changing already. But yeah, I think a lot of the growth has been in time, how I've managed my time, how I've like seen how important it is to communicate everything, even if it's uncomfortable, or even if it's like strenuous, or even if it's like might be quite demanding, to just have that transparency with that side. Again, it being like self-funded and not wanting to take on investment. There's been the natural challenge in that and putting everything back into it, but all of that to say, it's been so rewarding to see like myself and us continually like rise to each kind of occasion. Sure. I think all of the external work we've done, whether it's with like another brand or artist or space institution like the Science Museum, we've always bodied and always come with like 110 and I think walked away from all those at a bare minimum having learned a lot about our proficiency to again navigate bookends of spaces. So yeah, I think that growth in the last 6 months, and obviously like the actual people we've reached, some amazing individuals who are already building such like personal stories with the scents, and then our ability to like build a new connection to someone who maybe sees fragrance in a different way after having a conversation or two of us. So yeah, those have been some of the great growth points for me.
Love that.
What are you saying?
I think I've developed and grown a lot over the last 6 months. I think I I like, say like a year ago, yeah, or like I'm in like my last year at uni, I kind of had like ideas and intentions and wants, but never executed. It never, I didn't publish. I did a little bit in like other ways, but never in terms of what I actually wanted to do. And I think I had a difficult relationship with like being seen.
Sure.
And like,
But it sounds like, sorry to cut you, but it sounds like being being at Oxford University sounded like very demanding for what you had to like return there.
True.
But like outside of that space, maybe you weren't able to like put out what you wanted to put out because it was
That's true.
So much time spent there.
Contextualizing it in that way, and I'm not turning this into like a public therapy session or anything, but like contextualize it in that way is important.
Let's unpack that, Riley.
Yeah, so how do you feel about that? That'd be £50, please. So no, like I appreciate you saying that, because actually like going to the school that I did and it being rough and it being like you step outside to the boundaries and like the very like narrow things, you do like anything and you get called all sorts that I won't repeat. And I think that like I insisted on that, like especially as I got older, like insisted more on being by myself, like being myself in that way. But it took me a long time and a lot of like space and mobility and resource as well to be able to realize where that was coming from, and from a place of creativity rather than just like basic difference. Do you know what I mean? And I think like what the last, like a focus on a product and a brand has meant that like it's that willingness to be seen that I think it was never even in like my periphery or my vocabulary before. I didn't even clock it. I would just have it as this like, why am I not being productive? Why can't I get it done? Why am I scared about other projects that I've started for like 2 weeks and then abandoned and then just end up in some archive folder on my laptop?
Yeah,
do you know what I
yeah.
mean? So
well, I'd say as well, I'd like this as a question, like does the fact that their fragrances affect that too? Like if you were selling like, you know, your screen print teas, again, no shade to it, at a stand or a stall at a festival or in Camden or somewhere like that, would that be a different thing to selling a fragrance with the embodiment that we have behind it?
For sure. I think for two reasons. Fragrance, to be honest, in this light, the convenience of fragrance is that there's a differential there. Like there's an expertise. There is a kind of closed off thing there.
Right.
And like in our practice, we don't embody that. We don't try to intimidate or alienate in order to close a sale.
Sure.
But if you want that experience, like go to any department store or duty free. But I think have it like also the values and like the intentions behind the fragrances as well. And actually a lot of both our work and our time spent together, let's say it's like early days and we're at your flat in Hertfordshire and we're like chopping up ideas about where to take the brand. I remember, but this was like back in like November or something, like being scared to show it, even to you, even just internally, let alone putting it out in the world. And it was that hesitation of like the moment that it stops being private, it almost exists. It almost sets that standard.
Well, it becomes more than your perception of it and your kind of intention.
It's all cozy and internal and abstract and doesn't have to require much. And I think the pivot for me throughout this whole time has been going from that and carrying everything on my back and not being around other artists and not being around other creative people in that way, and you know, not coming from that environment. Oxford ain't that place. It's really not. Like, it's either the university and the whole academic world, and when you step a mile and a half outside of that, which is where I'm from, where I grew up, like, it's rough, it's dead, it's underfunded. Like, if you want to go get chicken and chips, or if you want to go and like cause trouble in the Sainsbury's, cool. But there's not much else going on, to be honest.
Yeah.
And so having you to work with, I think it kind of got to this point very quickly after like a week or two where I was like, yo, these feelings are like keep bubbling up. Like, what am I doing? Like, crack on, son. Do you know what I mean? Like, actually, like, come on.
Yeah.
And I think is then being able to share it with other people, even like as I was moving throughout London with you, would go to this space or go to this thing or whatever, kind of like February, March. Let's say we're coming back from the lab, going into Euston or whatever, and observing how you would share it with people, like on the train, on the platform, on the tube, like whatever it is. It just set an example for me as well, to be honest, of like how to share this and moving through space and placement in public like that.
Appreciate
Whereas
that.
I was like, before then, so individualistic.
Yeah.
So individualistic and closed off. Whereas through spending time with you, being close with you, working with you, it's, I would say, engendered more of an openness and generosity in myself, and like helped me understand like the the joy, but also the importance of that openness and that sharing
Appreciate
and that
that, man.
generosity.
Appreciate that. I mean, it's mad like to hear all this, because it's like from my view, and this is where I think like we really like make a very great like kind of working friction that like brings other people in ways that we're only going to get better at and already like finding our feet in really well. To me, these are things that I at times feel like I'm just like a kind of, I'm almost just the usher to the idea. And that's again like sometimes like they will be very, very like loaded intellectually, and you know, there's all these references firing off with I, for example, but with like Kava, like making something that triggers that joy, while like something that has that grownness and pride to it. I'm just shuttling that, you know. I'm like you know, I'm just, these ideas they're all from the gut. And obviously I'd worked on the fragrances, which are now in terms of finished fragrances 5 total, 6 if you include other ones, that I've had some for a while. Kava was the only fragrance that like I made after we met and started working together. I is, you know, 4 going on 5. Some of the other fragrances have been done. Seeing how for you this is like a new way of like sharing work, in a sense, like, and as you said before, communicating like how things are going to be translating, how things can be communicated to a customer. For me, these are things obviously that I have a kind of, I guess, protectiveness over naturally having made them, but like it's very much like, cool, these are wider ideas, these are wider spaces that I want to like help people get into, and like let's go with the best vessel or best way to communicate that and to get that out there. But that's always been, again, not just part of how, you know, a lot of my work I don't share. There's a lot of things that I've made that I don't put out. So like in that same way, but fragrance as a particular craft and a particular kind of metaphysical object or whatever, like that's part of my process, is sense checking with people who are not anywhere near your trade shows, your award ceremonies, but people who can just give me that unfiltered perspective from a lived experience. So yeah, that's what I'm saying. That like kind of friction is just mad interesting to hear. Like that has been a thing for you to kind of get out of a certain cocoon of maybe of not sharing anything. Whereas for me, it's like when I'm having those conversations, it's not with an agenda, but I'm just open to like learning from people. So what? Yeah, I've got the technical ability to like usher that idea in, cool. But really, I'm trying to like make something that people can take on, and again, are bigger than me. But
that sheer generosity and the way that you embody that, like, is like really special. And like,
well, appreciate that, man. That's
through...
what I'm saying again. Like we're talking about designers like Hepworth, even Henry Moore, Noguchi. You know, these people that, aside from making like astonishing forms, it's like really how they exist in space. When you place a Henry Moore sculpture in a field and have that like ability to like walk around it and appreciate it. These feel like almost monolithic like forms that have always existed, that are being lived around, you know, and in that same way it feels very much like a kind of channeling, if you want. Same again, as I said with Hepworth before, she spent so much time in these caves and in these spaces, like being sheltered and nurtured by them, that you can really feel that through her works. So I think, yeah, in that way, it's that similar. It's just the channeling. Yeah.
Let's talk about the next fragrance,
Cool.
and then let's have some dinner off camera.
Oh damn! I thought that was going to be part of it.
That'd be good.
This. Yeah. This.
Thanks.
I can't wait for people to experience it. The responsibility of intimacy. This was originally started as a fragrance I made in collaboration with Rona McKenzie for her last Selassie show.
You're not going to big up Ronan McKenzie. Bigged up everyone else.
Huge big ups to my wifey there.
Yeah.
Always. But yeah, I made this scent design for her last show for Selassie, the end of last year, November. It was an incredible show in a church designed by John Pawson, actually, in Hackney. Incorporated a chair, which she had designed alongside Job and Sirat from Orb Studio, who was there at the time. Like a piece of performance art, really. Many garments, some she designed with Ricky Wesley Harriott too. And I wanted to make a response to this ongoing kind of sense of intimacy and like bodily connection, skin to skin connection that the pieces were inspired by and kind of promoted as well. From like the knits being like exposing very like tender places in the body, to where some of the patterns of the knits come from, like keloid scarring, etc. These like very real, very human, I guess what are kind of deemed as maybe imperfections being brought to the forefront and celebrated. The scent that I made originally for that worked into this responsibility of what intimacy is. So it started as very kind of sweet, slightly sugary, almost like chapsticky, texture, and then from this kind of pleasant facade, as it enveloped and as you got into it, it got a lot more human and a lot more bodily, and not like off-putting, but smells that would maybe be something to cover up, like slightly sweaty, slightly hot, but it felt again very human and not trying to escape and not trying to mask, but more just trying to like allow and reveal. And over the last year, in ways, but since that show, I've developed it and added to it, stripped some things back a bit, and refined more notes on top of what is a more abstract texture. In terms of like perfumery, I'm mad proud of the technique from like taking this very abstract scent design thing to constructing more tangible notes, working with perfume structures. So you have a really, really crisp yuzu, which you might find in what some call a chypre, or possibly like a fougere, but either way, a really fresh and celebratory like element. Ro and I have like our own ongoing thing with the two parts, the yuzu and the fig that I added within ourselves. The fig is like a fantastical act of consistency is what I called it originally, but it transcends from like a fig, very fresh and like ripe fig leaf, super green, super clean, and goes into like the fig skin and flesh, which is a lot more juicy and kind of curvy, and then goes into the real like juice of the fig, which then is like the trail into this like intimacy. And I think the way that it works technically and like texturally again reads at first like a capital P perfume, like something that is not like copying another fragrance, but like something that is kind of reminiscent or like sampling certain like again structures, feelings, materials that are used in slightly more mainstream perfume, but then goes into this very niche space and again like texture, which feels way more bodily, way more human, and more like it's coming from the body, from the skin. So yeah, that's some of the thinking behind responsibility.
It's nice, isn't it?
It kind of bangs, you know.
So yeah, this is going to be a collaboration with Ronan's fashion brand, Selassie. Out. I just really need to finalise the dates, and I don't want to speak on it, and then it turns out to be wrong. But soon after.
Leading up to the 25th of November, the 23rd to the 25th is when we're aiming for.
Yeah, I'm excited for this to live. I think it's a really, really special fragrance, and I think even just from like an outside perspective, I think it is such an incredible story for. I mean, come on, man! Like, it's just like it is a fragrance which is a chronicle of yours and Ronan's relationship so far.
Yeah.
Find me another couple, yeah. Perfumer, art curator, fashion designer. Oh yeah, we've got a fragrance. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and I mean, Ro has a really great perspective on scent anyway.
Yeah.
She and her mum actually, but like she on her own has this really articulate way of describing scent to be like personality types, and doesn't kind of buy into like, again, the tropes of like perfume as a status symbol thing. She'll always critically break down like, smelt this 1,000 times in these spaces, or this just has a texture which is like cloying and like not comfortable, and even though the fragrance might be worth £300, makes no difference to how she perceives it, so objectively. But also I don't think you can kind of be around me and not like start to develop some kind of analysis for stuff or this observation or appreciation. So when we are having like exposed to new kind of spaces, new kind of situations, finding ourselves like the yuzu comes from like a yuzu sake we had at this amazing restaurant when we went to go see the Hepworth gallery at collection at Wakefield, sorry. So building that into the fragrance was super seamless, really. And again, I'm really proud of the outcome. It mirroring this sounds quite cryptic and poetic, like the responsibility of intimacy, but mirroring directly in like how the actual thing, how it flows in itself, going from first impressions to being real, you know. I hope that can encourage like thought and feeling in other people of like how important a first impression is, how important celebration is, how important consistency is, but ultimately like, you know, to not shy away from like honesty.
And this fragrance on the right people will definitely lead to more first impressions, more celebrations.
Yeah,
without a doubt. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing you and Ronan talking it more specifically as well with the launch and the activation and stuff. But
yeah, I mean, also
take a minute to preview it.
There is a bag we've designed together, which is the first like collaborative object that I've worked on as deya
Mm.
to go alongside this as an accessory, as well as a capsule collection that she's made as Selassie, which I won't give details on, but wow. And yeah, this is, I'm really excited to see this live in the world, as I said, and see where it goes.
100%. Let's end on one more thing.
Cool.
It'll probably end up being like 1.5, but that's fine. Let's give a snapshot of where we're at right now in terms of how deya runs and just where we're at this point in time, and then share where we want to be by April 10th, 2024, which will be 1 year since launching.
Amazing. So yeah, as I said, I've recently transitioned out of the laboratory that I was working at, or fiction, and will be working from a space in Shoreditch that Maya has Maya Njai has opened up. I'm really inspired by Maya's process and practice, and I think that's definitely a sobering reminder of like where we're at. She's 7 years plus into starting this and had no formal training, but thrives in her own way in how she's actually like moving.
She's a perfumer, by the way, runs a perfume.
Yeah,
brand.
yeah. Sorry,
Yeah.
for context.
She's like this amazing trapeze artist. 7 years deep.
Oh shit! 7 years deep, spinning all these plates. No, she's an incredible perfumer and friend and mentor and mentee to me. We've got we worked on a scent design project last year in Switzerland, which was really great. A place called Howville Castle. But yeah, no, she's definitely someone trailblazing in her own way, who might not say that she is, but she definitely is.
Yeah.
So right now, that's going to be my space to work from on perfumery and scent design. But yeah, currently we also have a workspace in Piccadilly. We're going to be working out of a co-working space there. But yeah, as of where we're at now, there is no one fixed place.
Yeah.
And I think that is affording us some, again, agility, and we're not tied down financially or in terms of security to a spot. But I definitely think for April next year, a year in, I want to be and have somewhere that I can call a solid base of operation while still keeping enough room for the agility to move around. And yeah, not be like, not have be stuck in the mud. Still be able to be mobile.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I think sort of on my end, if you've bought a fragrance from us, like it's coming out of my bedroom. Got some nice little IKEA shelves.
I get a fulfillment service, right?
Yeah, the proper fulfillment centre. And that's cool. In 6 months' time, we'll have 3 more fragrances to be distributing. And I am this weekend with my auntie renovating a room in my house to accommodate that future expansion of Agata Fulfillment Limited.
Excellent.
But I love doing that. I really love. It was like it was a new layout of experience for me to handle each sale that went out. Because when we first did the 8 mils of you would do it out of yours, and then sort of in the same move we had the 50s of and then in one day 100 mils of 8 mils, 50 mils and 100 mils of Kava. And it was a lot to juggle, especially when you were between your place in London and the lab out in Hertfordshire. So we moved it all to mine, and then I just popped to the post office on a good week most mornings. Big up Rose Hill, Donington Bridge post office. But yeah, I think that's where it would be. I'm really looking forward to having that space in my house, or mine and my mum's house. Big up everyone living at home with their mums.
Yeah,
Just to give
2023.
another like insight into the reality, I guess. Like you say like, oh cool, yeah, like running the fragrance brand, blah 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 blah. Like we're both living at home with our mums, and we know lots of other people close to us that are doing the same thing, and like thanks to our mums
Yeah,
as well for holding it down and providing our base there.
real talk.
100%. So
Sign
yeah,
of
it's
the
not so
times.
mad like you're not catching me in Soho wearing jorts and drinking a £10 Guinness every night.
No, it really is sign of the times, and again speaks to that, like this is all self-initiated, self-funded, and I've like personally had to, you know, sacrifice certain things to keep that afloat and to keep that moving and to keep that like, you know, pushing. So yeah, I think where we're at now, being that like we are working out of like different spaces often, or let's say have been, and I think has been an honest like real challenge in the last couple months, being disconnected from a single space and to be in the same space together at the same time. I think we're constantly adapting to that, and this kind of full circles for me. I think it's what I am finding a lot of pride in, when we actually stop to look at all the different places that we've worked with, all the different people that we've worked with, the people that we've interacted with and shared, and all of this in a relatively short amount of time, is that we are making the sacrifices like needed to keep it going.
Yeah.
But still holding it down and holding it down for each other. And even though there's all this behind the scenes, at the end of the day, people are still receiving the product and they're still happy, and they're still writing back to us, like thanking us for sending it, thanking us for the design.
It's the best feeling.
You know, even like to whatever standard we're holding ourselves to, it's like it's still being received like greatly by those who are engaging. So I think by April, aside from the physical space and having like started to build my own laboratory, which is already on the way, I think it's like I want to have kept track of all the things that we are doing, letting go of, and bringing in to grow from this.
Yeah.
And again, through thick, thin, left, down, right, up, like all of the different trials and tribulations and hurdles, still have each other's back on it.
100%. 100%. That's where it's heading. I said it would be 1.5. Just as a takeaway from anyone listening to this and like not necessarily like assuming their circumstance or position, let me reframe it. No, let me not. Jesus. Yeah, you see why I don't do podcasts full time.
We're at that time. This has been an audiobook still.
Legit. If you had to give not advice but one piece of encouragement, what would it be?
I'm not gonna say something like trust the process, because it's just like fuck me. I would be just saying that back to myself. Get specific. Get as specific as you can now, and be willing to like let go of that. If it's like a design you've got in your head, or it's a concept, or a artist you want to work with, or something that you know you have that might be kind of floating around, tether it down, move on it, see how it goes, and even if it goes amazingly, be prepared to let it go and like move forward again. And I think something that I'm always saying in many different contexts, but seek levity. I think having the levity to allow yourself to get creatively, financially, whatever, invested in something, and then to drop parts of it and shed that skin, that would be like such a critical and helpful piece of advice.
Mm.
I'm talking to like my younger self right now, who's starting to do all these different things and move. It's just like seek levity.
Yeah, I love that. You say that to me a lot as well. Yeah, I'd say coherence doesn't matter between yourself and what you do. I think for a long time I felt a difficulty about my like belonging in a particular space, environment, industry, even perhaps more locally at times, in a particular house, things like this around particular people. And like coherence really doesn't matter. And I think I often would search for how to like find that landing place. But really things are much more mobile than that, and much more like personally curated. You can curate experiences and circumstances for yourself that are more perhaps on surface level at first observation, more disparate, more separate, more contradictory perhaps. Like anything goes is what I'm trying to say. And I think for me that is one, despite those experiences, that is one attitude that's always got me through. It's like, as I was saying earlier about like, it's not working to be like, when I'm up there with these lot, then things are going to be great. It's like, no, I'm just here. And it's not having to be one particular way or like reduced down to one particular dimension in the way that you live your life, or one particular art form to experience or whatever. I think personally I'm more hesitant of this like real like hustle, aggressive like mentality of like just like give it your all, pour everything, because I've been tempted by that before. And I think, as we've said to ourselves many times, and like to each other, about making ourselves martyrs to what we're doing, and at times kind of bending over backwards for not necessarily the best reason. And I think one thing that you taught me early on was you need to live in order to create, that you actually need to do life. And yeah, understanding all these different things is like yourself, you can create components of your life that don't all have to be this like along this one through line.
Yeah.
That is so freeing, because it means that, you know, we can talk about the politics of the fragrance industry in a modern context and blah 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 blah, but then like I'll go home the same day and like watch football with my mates down the pub, and then the next day I'm like listening to different music in the morning, and then I'm doing different, like all these different things. And especially in terms of like these environments and like class differentials in my life, it's actually given me space to become more accepting and more loving of where I actually come from too, and just be present in those moments and those environments as well, because it's not Harrods, it's not Mayfair, it's not any of that. And so it's just this more like panoramic and chaotic picture, but not assuming that like one destination or like one thing is going to be the resting place, because it doesn't exist.
Right. I mean, I think it's interesting to hear you say it in that way, because I think for me, what I am kind of learning maybe from you and like our difference in how we got to this and is like, I see how you do give things your all, and how I do as well, but it's like defining like what is kind of going to be like the molding part of the getting really like head in the sand into one thing. For me, like becoming a technical perfumer, or technically being a perfumer, but then to like eagle out and see things, as you said, like panoramically, it's giving you all. It's giving you all to when we're mashing work for like sometimes crazy hours, but then giving it all to go to the football game with your friends, like with your boys.
It's giving it your all in the moment, rather than thinking that giving your all to one thing will enable you to experience all the time what it's like to give your all.
Right.
Does that make sense?
You said all a lot.
Like whoever's listening to this, rewind it, 0.5 speed.
Yeah, no, I think that's kind of that's I think solid advice, to seek levity and not maybe to not put all your eggs in one basket, expecting, you know, to start a farm shop, or not, you know, not to see any one avenue as the albeit solution to everything.
Yep.
Those are things that I think, yeah, here, if I'd heard younger, would have benefited me massively.
Mm.
Yeah.
You might have heard it younger, but you wouldn't have listened to it. That's the thing. That's the thing.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway,
Possibly.
listen, this has been excellent.
It's been great.
It's been great to hold this space.
Yeah.
And appreciate people who are watching and listening to, and just excited to be back here in 6 months' time.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
To reflect in the same way.
I mean, give thanks, and honestly so grateful for like everyone who's backing it. There's like, again, so many stories already that people are like making this their own, and like, you know, in a very sincere way, taking these windows into really, really important parts of their life and significant moments. So thank you to everyone who's backing it and making their own out of this. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to like listen back to this, like April next year.
Yeah.
But yeah, man.
We'll have to do a Deya Reacts channel.
Oh Lord, to ourselves.
Yeah. Cool. All right, let's end it. Let's go get some food.
Big up.
Nice one, man.
Big up.